Hello and welcome. Today trainers Alicia, Min and Monique will take you expatriates through a training session about moving to Vietnam and what endeavours this involves. Please enjoy.
So I will be giving you a brief overview of today's training session. For our first day, we will be focusing on cultural training, and we are taking the effective approach with the pre-departure training program. So it will last for 3 weeks. This will allow for classroom discussion and one-on-one discussion, interaction between the pupils and the teachers, in-depth and personal learning about Vietnam and its culture, and each session is expected to last from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I'll quickly touch on the language training as well. This is expected to last for 4 months. Our Vietnamese teacher will be brought into the office to teach Vietnamese 1 hour every day from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. You will also be expected to practice and learn in your spare time to improve the fluency and even learn a bit ahead with your Vietnamese. So here we have our day one schedule of our pre-departure training. So from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. we're having an introduction and icebreaker activities just to ease the tension a little bit in the room and to get to know each other a bit better. From 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. we're having a briefing session on Vietnam. This includes general information about the country, such as their laws, political stance, government, economical issues, religions, climates, even geographical issues, etc., etc. From 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. we're having a class or like a one-on-one discussion about what we just learnt. Then from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. you're having your Vietnamese language class scheduled with the Vietnamese teacher. From 12 p.m. to 12:55 p.m. is your lunch break, so you can relax, have something to eat. Then from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. We're having a cultural profiling session, basically discussing the cultural differences that Vietnam have that are a bit different to Australia. Then from 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. we're having another class or one-on-one discussion to really just take in what we just learnt. Then from 3:30 to 4, a tea or coffee break. Then from 4:10 to 5 o'clock, you have a summary of today's session, and we will discuss your homework as well for the next day. So we chose to include the briefing on Vietnam and the cultural profiling today because really it sets a foundation for what you will be learning throughout this pre-departure training program. So it will help you a lot with understanding the next lesson as well. So we chose to do those topics today. So you're probably wondering why pre-departure training is so important. Well, it's important that you do undergo this training so you feel comfortable and prepared when you do enter Vietnam. You're able to understand the country you'll be living in. You avoid conflict with others that do reside in the country by learning and respecting their culture and their customs. You avoid major culture shock by preparing yourself for what you're entering into. And you will have a higher rate of success with your work if you know what you're walking into as well.
Over the years, Vietnam has become an increasingly popular place not only to visit but for expatriates to relocate to. It is said that Ho Chi Minh City is the most westernized city in Vietnam and is home to the largest community of expatriates as well as the highest number of foreign companies. Whilst Hanoi, which is located in the north, is the political and administrative centre of the country, being that it is not only one of the most ancient capitals in the world, expatriates appreciate it for its colonial architecture. Vietnam is a vibrant and dynamic city that have a number of amenities that expatriates have become accustomed to. The climate is tropical, meaning the weather is always warm. However, you do get those rainy days in the summer. Expatriates are also attached to the low cost of living Vietnam offers. Foreigners can live a very comfortable life here with a modest income. There is a range of accommodation available to fit a variety of differing budgets, from upmarket apartments in the city to humble houses in the suburbs. In Vietnam, there is a number of multiple transportation options, although the most popular is the motorbike/scooter because it is the much cheaper option. Also, Vietnamese authorities do not accept international driver's license. You will find that the streets in Vietnam are flooded with traffic, and it is not uncommon for people driving on the motorbikes to find their way on the sidewalks. This enormous rush of traffic therefore means that there are horns sounding all day long, as well as there is an alarming amount of pollution dispersed into the air, often meaning that people wear masks in the aim to prevent them from breathing in the unclear fumes. There is also a noticeable difference between prices of food bought locally compared to Western food bought in Vietnam. Those who buy local from restaurants or bars will obviously discover that their options are much cheaper than eating in the westernized restaurants and bars, as they are more expensive. However, beer and spirits can be acquired at a very low price, whilst wine is dearer. Culture is an umbrella term which includes the customary beliefs, social behaviours and norms which are identified in human societies. These particular people belong to groups which are comprised of social habits, language, religion, art, cuisine, music and values. In its cultural dimensions, we can see that the biggest difference between Australia and Vietnam is individualism, with an estimated score of 70 between them. Then the other cultural dimensions has an average of about 30 points between them. In regards to individualism, Australia is a very individualist culture, indicating that they prioritise achieving individual personal goals and that the expectation is that people look after themselves. Whilst, on the other hand, Vietnam scored a 20, telling us that they have a collectivist society, meaning that they as a society prefer a tight-knit environment. They prioritise the importance of groups, what the group's goals are, and how they can be achieved together. People's success in a collective society is achieved by the support and view of other members in the group. The impact this has on the HR management is that during the hiring and promotions process, in-groups have to be considered. In addition, a collective society impacts relationships in Vietnam, as close connections to people are valued in the workforce. So, it is important for expatriates to get to know their business associates well. Furthermore, networking is incredibly important in Vietnam, as businessmen prefer to work with those who have been suggested by friends or a business contact over people who address them directly. Lastly, Vietnamese people will go to a great deal of effort to stay silent during business ventures if someone disagrees with them on what they are saying. This is merely to keep up with appearances and save face. In respect to power distance, it can be seen as the extent to which less powerful employees in an organisation accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. Therefore, the main aim of power distance is to observe how societies deal with the inequalities amongst people. The results prove that Australia has a low power distance, meaning their organisational structure tends to be flatter, signifying that managers intend to consult employees when making decisions. They do this in order to gain approval from employees. It is also in this instance where employees feel that they can challenge the decisions made by managers. On the other hand, Vietnam has a high power distance culture, meaning that they have strict organisational structure and employees respect and follow their superior decisions and instructions, thus demonstrating that Vietnam's business culture is very hierarchical. Expatriates should show respect for their elders and senior role models, meaning when addressing colleagues, it is imperative that expatriates remember to use formal titles followed by the co-worker's first name rather than their surname. In addition, when addressing elders or senior figures, it is polite to slightly bow, whilst when addressing younger business colleagues, you will greet them with an appropriate handshake. It is important to mention that Australia scored higher in masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and indulgence, whilst Vietnam scored higher in long-term orientation.
To help you better understand Vietnamese culture and avoid any culture shock, here are some customs that you should be familiar with before coming to Vietnam. As an influence of Confucianism, respect is one of the core values of Vietnamese culture, in which age determines the grading of respect in many interactions. Often this can mean a person has to unconditionally obey seniors and should not disagree with their elders unless they're able to do so very respectfully. In greeting, people should always be greeting in order of age. We should also be expected to take off your hat and bow your head politely when addressing them. Otherwise, a handshake or a slight bow of your head is a general custom to saying hello and goodbye. People usually only hug to greet their relatives or very close friends. Similarly, direct eye contact is acceptable within peers but should be deferred away from those who are of opposite gender or higher status or older than you. Another value of Vietnamese culture is modesty and virtuousness, but these values are perceived and exhibited slightly differently in Vietnam. The Vietnamese tend to only to apologize or thank a person when they truly believe that one's actions have indebted them or deserve gratitude. Ritual lines expressed in Western culture such as thank you, excuse me, and sorry, which are automatic responses say to acknowledge minor incidents and courtesies, can be considered insincere by Vietnamese. These cultural differences in manner sometimes lead Australians to perceive Vietnamese as rude or disrespectful. So in Vietnamese culture, thank you someone in words is very formal. It means you and the other person are strangers and don't know each other well. So the idea is that if you're close with someone, of course you're going out of your way for them. No thanks are necessary. The concept of face is another extremely important aspect. Face is a concept that can be roughly described as reflecting a person's reputation, dignity, and prestige. By complimenting people, showing them respect, or doing something to increase their self-esteem, you give them face. Similarly, people can lose face by being criticized or behaving in a way that is considered socially inappropriate. As an expert, you should be aware of some scenarios that might cause someone to lose face, which include avoiding profusely complimenting people or using very colorful language to praise something. This can often be interpreted as insincere. Another way that you can make cause someone to lose face is by embarrassing them, again especially in public, directly criticizing someone or pointing out his or her mistakes. The advice try to deflect blame away from the person and onto something else. Do not break any promise that you have already committed to, verbally and written. This can lead to a big loss of face and jeopardize the Vietnamese person's trust and confidence in you. There are also other common taboos that you should be avoid. The number one is probably being affectionate in public, which is a big no-no in Vietnam. So try to avoid hugging, holding hands, and especially kissing in public. Even touching a member of opposite sex is looked down upon. Secondly, pointing at the soles of your feet as someone is seen as extreme rudeness and could easily get you into trouble. In Vietnam, putting your feet up on the chair, certainly any place near to where someone might put their head, is seen as very disrespectful. The foot is considered dirtiness part and the head is seen as sacred, so do not touch someone's hats or pass items over someone's head. This is incredibly offensive even with small children. When you need to hand something to someone, make sure you use both hands. This is seen as respectful. It is also disrespectful to point at people and things with your index finger. If you need to draw attention to something, use your whole hand. As you will do business in Vietnam, there are some basic etiquette that you should know. The Vietnamese people are generally punctual and expect the same standard from others, so try to avoid arriving late, and if you cannot make it on time, make sure you inform in advance and give appropriate apologies. Since Vietnamese culture values relationships, it is important to make an effort to keep discussion harmonizing and balanced. This means all disagreements and conflicts should be dealt with in the most diplomatic and private manners possible. In terms of cross-cultural communication, Vietnam have a high contact culture in which they prefer to use indirect communication. So in other words, they might not clearly say what they actually think. You might need to take all the non-verbal cues throughout into considerations. For example, Vietnamese people will not give a flat no to refuse. Instead, they will use a hint of hesitation or even use a third person to reject. And same nonverbal communication might convey different message in different cultures, so it's important to understand the meaning of each connotations. For example, remaining silent in Vietnamese culture could be a sign of politely disagreement that show your respectfulness. When there is a point of tension or difficulty that can't be resolved, silence is a way of allowing the conversation to simmer back to harmony so that there is a clear space for a new topic of discussion. Australians often find silence like it's awkward and perceive it to be lack of personal capability. So the advice: try not to interrupt the silence or continue to push the problem. So hopefully this initial information that we gave today could help you to familiarize with Vietnamese culture. In the upcoming week, we will continue to deliver cross-cultural training through role-playing and case study, as well as offering language courses. Alongside, we will be offering training related to task and stress management. So thank you for listening. See you next week.